So here we go for the second half of Session 3, Session 9B, Tribulation and Wrath, Part 2. We've been in the book of Daniel looking for what Jesus mentioned in the Olivet Discourse about the abomination of desolation. And now we've come to the fourth vision in Daniel, Daniel chapter 9, which is the famous 70 weeks prophecy. Biblical chronologers have wrestled with this passage for centuries. Many theories have been proposed and then abandoned when their projected dates failed to fulfill expectations. They were projecting like when the Babylonian captivity occurred with the popes in Europe, and other events, Charlemagne and various other things were the end dates for some of this stuff. But of course, then when they came and went, they said, well, that wasn't it. So many theories have been proposed. The most common theory of which is that the 70 weeks or sevens are weeks of years, quote unquote, or sabbatical years, which would make that span 490 years long. It was believed to foretell when the Messiah would first come. Most scholars that were of that opinion took their starting point of their count at the 20th year of Artaxerxes I, when they say that Nehemiah was given the governorship of Judea so that he could accomplish his goal of rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem. But in earlier sessions, I disproved that because of the age of Mordecai. We know he was in a carrying away by Nebuchadnezzar. And so if Nehemiah was sent out by Artaxerxes I, it would make Mordecai 124 years old when he became Grand Vizier of Persia. And that's not a possibility. So we determined that Darius I actually was the king that was Esther's husband, and also the one that Nehemiah was the chief of security for in his 20th year. The temple construction was restarted in the month of Elul in 519 BC and finished in Adar of 1515 BC during Darius I's reign. Ezra arrived in Jerusalem soon afterward. Mordecai's appointment as Grand Vizier and the Jewish festival of Purim in the book of Esther occurred in the winter of 509 BC. The Jews' influence in the Persian court persisted then because of Esther being the queen and Mordecai being the Grand Vizier, eventually involving the appointment of Nehemiah, a known Jew, to the very influential position of food taster, which is chief of security. I believe that in 501 BC would be the 20th year of Darius I, was when the wall was built in Jerusalem. In my paper on the chronology of Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther, I prove that the temple was built before the wall in Jerusalem, and the high priest's genealogy given in Ezra and Nehemiah proves that. So everyone is incorrect that tries to say that Nehemiah built the wall first and that Artaxerxes I was the king. But Tishri I fell on September the 19th in 522 BC when Darius I first came to power. That's when Hebrew lunar months were synchronous with the Babylonian and Persian calendars. Darius assassinated an impostor named Smerdis or Gaumata. We're not sure who he was because he was an impostor. That occurred on September the 29th, and he became king shortly thereafter. So therefore, Darius the first accession year was from Tishri the first 522 to Tishri the first 521. And they used accession counting for their kings. He spent the next couple years or so putting down revolts. So it was fitting that in the third year of Darius the first, he had a big party at his palace, showing off his riches and majesty, as the book of Esther reports. Darius the first had the penchant for such grandiose things. He even advertised his legitimacy to the throne in a 50-foot by 80-foot inscription written on the side of a mountain 300 feet up. It's called the Behishtan inscription. It still exists today. So Nisan in his 20th year would have been in 501 BC. That's when Nehemiah started out. So if the starting point for the 490 years was that king's appointment of Nehemiah to rebuild the walls, then 490 years from 501 ends in 11 BC, and that is not significant of anything. So I do not think that the 70 weeks was 490 years. I think that it was 490 days. 490 literal days. 70 literal weeks was the length of Jesus's ministry. So Daniel 9 verse 20, we'll go to Daniel chapter 9 verse 20. It says, "And while I was speaking and praying and confessing my sin and the sin of my people Israel, and presenting my supplication before the Lord my God for the holy mountain of my God, yea, while I was speaking in prayer, even the man Gabriel, angel, whom I had seen in the vision at the beginning, being caused to fly swiftly, touched me about the time of the evening oblation. And he informed me and talked with me and said, O Daniel, I am now come forth to give you skill and understanding. At the beginning of thy supplications the commandment came forth, and I came to show thee, for thou art greatly beloved. Therefore understand the matter and consider the vision." Verse 24, here it is. 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city to finish the transgression, and to make an end of sins, and to make reconciliation for iniquity, and to bring in everlasting righteousness, and to seal up the vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The street shall be built again, and the wall, even in the end of times. Now, some of this translation is difficult, so I'm going to be bringing things in from the Rotherham Emphasized Bible. Verse 26, "And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself," and not for himself is, "and have nothing. And the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with a flood. And unto the end of the war astounding things are determined." Verse 27, "And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week, and in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease, and for the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate." Rotherham says, "And in his stead shall be the abomination that makes desolate, even until the consummation, the full end, Rotherham says, and that determined shall be poured out upon the desolate. Verse 24 contains a polysyndeton. The significance of this figure of speech is that each item in the list in verse 24 is important. Furthermore, the elements so emphasized are structured in an introversion. That's an ABC, CBA structure. Since the A's and the B's and the C's correspond, like in Hebrew poetry, we can compare and contrast them to gain further insight. See, this is one of the features of what I call prophecy speak. It can lapse into poetry and a lot of imagery. And so just like visions have symbols, verbal prophecies often have poetic, symbolic, or wisdom-filled terminology. That's what I call prophecy speak. Figures of speech and structure are some of the ways that clues to its meaning are embedded. Without these clues, deciphering prophecy is mostly guesswork. So the A's are equal. To finish the transgression, what does that mean? The answer is in the corresponding A, to anoint the most holy. Well, when was the most holy, the Messiah, anointed? Well, he was anointed when he received the Spirit, when he was baptized. And its conveyance via a phenomenal voice from heaven indicated that this was an administration change. So, the transgression that was finished was the end of the law era, the law administration. So the baptism of Christ on Sunday, Shabbat the 20th, February 16th in 27 AD, was the beginning point of the 70 weeks. Then the B terms, to make an end of sins and to seal up the vision and prophecy. There's a clue there that tells us that this is an introversion with the repetition of the word seal. To make an end, to seal an end of sins is what the text is. And the other B is to seal up the vision and prophecy. So that's a clue to tell us that the B's should be equal, and the clue is in that there's an ABC, CBA structure here. Okay, so when was an end made to sins, and when was the vision and prophecy sealed? That's like sealed, unalterable, sealed legally. Well, that's when Jesus was raised from among the dead. After that, everything to come was the foregone conclusion. That proved that redemption was legally legal. That sealed it. All right? So, and then Hebrews 9:26 talks about this. I'll just read it. You can say here in Daniel, for then must he often have suffered since the foundation of the world, but now once in the end, the consummation of the world, the ages, hath he appeared to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. So when Jesus died on the cross and was raised, that was the consummation of the ages. Now finally, the C terms, to make reconciliation for iniquity and to bring in everlasting righteousness. Well, when did that righteousness come? It came on the day of Pentecost with the church, with all the rights and privileges that came with becoming born again. So, to make reconciliation, that's when the reconciliation happened as well. On the day of Pentecost, everything came. So, The C terms are the day of Pentecost, which was June the 20th in 28 AD. That's when reconciliation became possible and everlasting righteousness for believers commenced. This constituted the end of the 70 weeks. Daniel 9 goes on with more information. Now, by the way, this 70 weeks is also talked about in the book by Michael Rood, The Chronological Gospels, The Acceptable Year of the Lord. And he goes through all 70 weeks. Walter Cummins has a book, The Acceptable Year of the Lord, and he also goes through the 70 weeks. And finally, there was an unpublished book, Jesus Christ, Our Apostle and High Priest, that was written by Reverend Walter Cummins and Reverend John Crouch, but it was never published because they left the ministry that sponsored it, and the ministry deep-sixed that book. I have a copy. Daniel 9:25 goes on to say, "Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and build Jerusalem unto Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks, and 62 weeks the street shall be built again, and the wall, even in troublous times." So verse 25 gives us the beginning point for the 70 weeks. Now, if that actually were the commandment to rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, how does that fit with finishing the transgression? See, so there's something spiritual going on. And so this prophecy is in true ethereal form. It's spoken from God's perspective. So the street and the wall is like the expression Alpha and Omega, soup to nuts, A to Z. That is the entire thing. That is the figure of speech merismos, where two extremities represent the whole thing. So what Jesus did made the whole of New Jerusalem available. All was rebuilt spiritually. Now, verse 26 states that after 62 weeks the Messiah shall be cut off. Cut off is an idiom meaning to be killed. Jesus was crucified after the 62nd week, in the 63rd week. Okay, so it fits. And as verse 27 states, he shall confirm the covenant for 1 week. Well, he was chosen as the Passover lamb on the same day that the Passover lamb was set out, on the 10th of Nisan, as the lamb of the first year, without blemish, the first day of that week. And he died in the midst of the week on Wednesday. Jesus didn't die on Good Friday. You can't get 3 days and 3 nights between Good Friday and Easter morning. In fact, he was already up Saturday night. So in the midst of the week is Wednesday, which fits. And he caused, because he was the perfect sacrifice, he caused the sacrifice and oblation to cease. It was no longer effective. His sacrifice superseded it. So the second half of verse 26 and the second half of verse 27 are predictions of consequences that follow, but they're not timed. They're also poorly translated in King James, but clearer in Rotherham's Emphasized Bible. So the prince that shall come was Titus, who in 70 AD led the Roman army who stormed the city in a final military charge. The word flood in Hebrew also can mean military charge. And he destroyed both the temple and the city, as the prophecy says. And in the place of the Holy of Holies, The Roman legionnaires sacrificed to their standards, according to Josephus, and that is an abomination of desolation. The temple has been destroyed, and as that destruction is lasting even until now. So verse 26 and 27 fit. Now, in context, what was the decree to restore and to rebuild Jerusalem? Well, it would have been that voice from heaven when Jesus was baptized. I presented a study about the oracles of God in my volume 4. This pronouncement was one of them. Men only heard, "This is my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased." But to Jesus, that was the go sign. Yeah, I mean, it was even called a decree. He had all the heavenly endorsement that he needed to commence his Father's work. Now, of course, only he knew what that all entailed. But now, with our new understanding of these oracles of God, which were the royal decrees commencing time periods, the decrees commencing time periods were the oracles of God, or there were phases of Christ's ministry, we can understand some of the deeper ramifications of this. This is exactly what Jesus' job was, to restore and to build Jerusalem. Now, the Judeans were looking for a political deliverer who would restore Jerusalem to its rightful place in the world, and even greater in the times of David and Solomon. But Jesus came first to do the job spiritually. Now, of course, critics will resist such claims of the spiritual application of such things. But Jesus claimed something similar in John 2, where he asserted a spiritual application. In John chapter 2, verse 19, John chapter 2, verse 19, Jesus answered and said unto them, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." Then said the Jews, 46 years was this temple in building, and will you rear it up in 3 days? But he spake of the temple of his body. So you see, that was a spiritual application. Daniel 9 speaks of 3 time periods: 7 weeks, 62 weeks, and 1 week. That makes 70. The week we call Holy Week began Nisan the 10th in 28 AD, and it was exactly 62 weeks after Jesus was baptized, because 27 AD had an intercalary year, second Adar, according to Parker and Duberstein. They have a book that you can Google. I think it's available for free on archive.org, where you can see that 27 AD had a 13th month. That's how we're able to get the 70 weeks. All right? So if you count backwards from the Passover mentioned in John chapter 2, and count the days mentioned that are in John, in between that and the 40-day temptation, then you can count all the way back to the day he was baptized on Shabbat the 20th, February 16th, 27 AD. But then it talks about the 7 weeks. What are the 7 weeks for? In the various 490 year scenarios, I hadn't seen anything that accommodated it. But there is a definite 7-week period in Jesus' ministry between his raising from death and Pentecost. Now, the order is different, but sometimes the order of events in prophecy is mixed, because prophecy is timeless. So the end of that counting was Messiah the Prince, which would be on Pentecost when he officially took the reins of the church. So the 70 weeks is 62 plus 1 plus 7 is 70 literal weeks. And in support of that also is, when things can be taken literally, we should try that first, and then, if they don't work literally, look for symbolic. So in this case, the literal works. So Jesus predicted the destruction of the second temple in Matthew 24, where he declared that one stone would not be left upon another. So thorough was the destruction by the Roman army, they were so enraged with the Jews for their stubbornness that when they had the opportunity, they stormed the city, they murdered thousands, they burnt down the temple, and then they pried apart the stones in the temple to recover any of the melted gold from the treasury that had been in the temple when it had been set on fire. So this prophecy remarkably still tracks with history. The second temple has never been rebuilt. Daniel predicted that this quote-unquote desolation will last even unto the time of consummation. The temple is supposed to exist again in the future, and it will be the temple that the Antichrist shall occupy in 2 Thessalonians 2. So again, the prophecy in Daniel fits. I know there are some terms that are a bit enigmatic, but that is what prophecy speak is like. Plus, of course, the precision that the 70 weeks fits is remarkable, and that in itself is very convincing. The fifth vision in the book of Daniel is Daniel chapter 10, has a brief appearance of an angel. No end times info is given, so we'll skip to the sixth vision. The sixth vision is Daniel 11. This is a fascinating forecast of the rivalry between the king of the south, which I believe was the Ptolemaic dynasty, and the king of the north, which is the Seleucid dynasty. And all of that occurred after Malachi and before Jesus' ministry, and doesn't have any eschatological import. You can read about it in my handout on the prophecies of Daniel. But it does bring up something that keeps occurring in the book of Daniel, which is the abomination of desolation. This has already come up in prophecy with Antiochus IV in Daniel 8, where it gave its duration, in addition to Jerusalem being trodden underfoot. Then it's mentioned again in the 70-week prophecy in Daniel 9, in which it is said will occur in place of the sacrifice after the Messiah is cut off. Well, the Messiah is not going to die in the future in the sixth administration. He only dies once. So that's why I believe that this abomination of desolation also has already occurred when the temple was destroyed in 70 AD. But this abomination of desolation is mentioned in Daniel 11. So let's go there. Daniel 11, verse 31. Daniel 11, verse 31. And arms shall stand on his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength, and take away the daily sacrifice, and they shall place the abomination that maketh desolate, and such as do wickedly against the covenant shall he corrupt by flatteries, but the people that do know their God shall be strong and do exploits. So this occurrence of the abomination of desolation, I believe, referred to the one that happened with Antiochus IV, because all the rest of the sixth vision in Daniel 11 fits with recorded history, even the ships from Kittim and everything, that the Roman proconsul drew a circle around the Antiochus and said, you have to decide what you're going to do about Egypt before you leave this circle. And all of that stuff occurred back then, so that's past history. So now we go to the seventh vision in Daniel. The seventh vision in Daniel does involve the end times, and this is in Daniel chapter 12. Daniel chapter 12. Let's look at verse 1. Daniel chapter 12, verse 1. And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince, which stands for the children of thy people. And there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. And many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, some to shame and everlasting contempt. And they that be wise shall shine as the brightness of the firmament, that they turn many to righteousness as the stars forever and ever. So this is a brief summary of the entire sixth administration. Verse 4, But thou, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book, even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. Then I, Daniel, looked, and behold, there stood other two, one on this side of the bank of the river, and the other on that side of the bank of the river. And one said to the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, How long shall it be to the end of these wonders? And I heard the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, when he held up his right hand and his left hand unto heaven, and swear by him that lives forever, that it shall be for a time, times and a half. Wow, there it is. Now we know. Huh? When he shall have accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people, and all these things shall be finished. And I heard, but I understood not. Then said I, O my Lord, what shall be the end of these things? And he said, Go your way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. Now, some commentators have claimed that they knew the meaning of that enigmatic phrase, time, times, and a half. All right? But verse 9 says it's sealed. All right? So I'm not going to guess. It's sealed. When it happens, then we'll slap our head and we'll say, oh, that's what he meant. Okay? But I'm not going to guess. It's sealed till the time of the end. Well, it's not the time of the end yet. So I'm not going to guess. Daniel 12, verse 10. Many shall be purified and made white and tried, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. And from the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away, and the abomination makes desolate set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Blessed is he that waiteth, and comes to the 1,330 days. But go thy way till the end, for thou shalt rest and stand in thy lot at the end of the days. So, at the very end of the book of Daniel, the abomination of desolation is mentioned again, and with it, a time period of 1,290 days. Then there is another mysterious time period of 1,335 days. We're going to look at these in a future session. The last mention of the abomination of desolation foretells that it will also be an event in the end times. So it happened once when Antiochus IV desecrated the altar and banned temple services. That is the origin of the Jewish festival of Hanukkah. It happened again when the temple was destroyed in 70 AD, and it will happen again in the third temple, which has not been built yet. This third occurrence is what Jesus foretold of in the Olivet Discourse, and it will be what Paul foretold in 2 Thessalonians as the Antichrist sitting in the temple, showing that he is God. So what did Jesus say? Go to Matthew chapter 24. He said in verse 15, Matthew 24:15, When you therefore shall see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place. Whoso readeth, let him understand. So the abomination of desolation is a desecration of the altar. And that certainly will be when the Antichrist is there. Verse 16. Then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. Let him which is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house. Neither let him which is in the field return back to take his clothes. And woe to them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. But pray ye your flight be not in the winter, neither on the Sabbath day, for then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, nor ever shall be. So this event of the abomination of desolation functions as a chronological alarm clock connecting eschatological events, for it comes just before the tribulation, because Jesus said so. Then it'll be followed by a number of events which are part of the wrath, because in Matthew 24 verse 29, immediately, Jesus says, immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. So, in the few minutes left in this session, I'll begin to cover the wrath of God phase in the book of Revelation. These are some awesome passages in this book. So far, we've been able to navigate the first section by making sure we read what is written and interpret it in light of what it meant to them in ancient times. We looked up the terms used in the Bible and saw how they were used and imported that meaning back into the first section. But you have to remember, we are not in a time machine in the book of Revelation, viewing events exactly as they will physically appear. We're reading about a vision that a first century apostle and prophet saw and expressed as it appeared to him in his words. Things and visions are symbols and convey meaning that's packaged in the vision. We're not watching television or a movie. We're watching an animation, and the artist who produced it is God. He is depicting the events in prophecy speak. So, Revelation 8:1, when he opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven about the space of half an hour. And I saw that seven angels which stood before God, and to them were given seven trumpets. And another angel came and stood at the altar, having a golden censer, and there was given unto him much incense, that he should offer it with the prayers of all saints upon the golden altar which was before the throne. And the smoke of the incense which came with the prayers of the saints ascended up before God out of the angel's hand. And verse 5, the angel took the censer and filled it with fire from the altar, and he cast it into the earth. And there were voices and thunderings and lightnings and an earthquake. So there is the second occurrence of that phrase that breaks the book of Revelation up into four parts. And so, in addition, there was an earthquake. Now, who are the seven angels? Angels appear throughout the book of Revelation, but that shouldn't be remarkable, because the book is a vision from the perspective of heaven. Most of the angels are unidentified and not much described, mostly just mentioned, like another angel, quote, another angel, etc. Well, we would expect the same from a view on a street corner in New York City, except for the fact that these are angels. Huh? Wow, seeing that many angels is remarkable. They primarily, though, are behind the scenes, working all around us, but we almost never see them. However, there are a few spiritual beings that are described in more detail in Revelation and mentioned more often. These are the Lamb, the 4 living creatures, and the 7 angels around God's throne. But who are the 7 angels? Their main function is before God's throne. Hence, we know them as archangels. Arch from arche, beginning, top, ruling. So they're ruling angels. Now only 2 are named in the Bible, Gabriel and Michael. Hebrew tradition has names for the rest, but it's not confirmed if those are accurate. Some of those names even come from the book of Enoch, which is total fantasy. The only other mention of them is in the book of Zechariah. Look at Zechariah chapter 3. Zechariah chapter 3 in verse 9. This is when they were laying the foundation, the cornerstone for the second temple. For behold, the stone that I have laid before Joshua. Joshua was the high priest at that time. Upon one stone shall be 7 eyes. Behold, I will engrave the graving thereof, saith the Lord of hosts, and I will remove the iniquity of that land in one day. That is Zechariah chapter 4, verse 9 also. Zechariah chapter 4, verse 9. The hands of Zerubbabel have laid the foundation of this house. Zerubbabel was the governor of Judea during that time. Zerubbabel have laid the foundation of this house. His hands shall also finish it. And thou shalt know that the Lord of hosts has sent me unto you. For who hath despised the day of small things? For they shall rejoice, and shall see the plummet in the hand of Zerubbabel. So this is the plummet to get the vertical, like we have a level to get the horizontal. Well, they would get the vertical, and 90 degrees from that vertical would be the level. The plummet in the hand of Zerubbabel, with those 7, they are the eyes of the Lord, which run to and fro through the whole earth. So these 7 angels carry out important roles in the book of Revelation. So much so, they are even mentioned in the introduction. Look at Revelation chapter 1, verse 4. Revelation chapter 1, verse 4. It says, John to the 7 churches which are in Asia, grace be unto you, and peace from him which is, and which was, and which is to come, and from the 7 spirits which are before his throne. These are the same 7. Revelation chapter 4, verse 5. And out of the throne proceeded lightnings and thunderings and voices. That's the first occurrence of that phrase. And there were 7 lamps of fire burning before the throne, which are the 7 spirits of God. Same 7. Then they are, Revelation chapter 3, verse 1, in the first part of the verse, Revelation 3, 1a, and unto the angel of the church in Sardis write, these things saith he that hath the 7 spirits of God and the 7 stars. So Jesus is speaking, and he has the 7 spirits. So this is like Hebrews mentioned, that all the angels worship him. Jesus was set at the front, at the head of the hierarchy of angels after he ascended. Revelation chapter 5, verse 6. Revelation chapter 5, verse 6. And I beheld, and lo, in the midst of the throne and of the 4 beasts, and in the midst of the elders, stood a lamb, as it had been slain, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent forth into all the earth. So the horns symbolize leadership, kings. They are the heads of the rest of the angels, and the eyes symbolize watchfulness. So the rest of the angel ranks are ordered under the headship of these 7 angels, and they report back to them. These angels are also the 7 trumpet angels in the second section. Revelation 8:2. Revelation 8:2. And I saw these 7 angels which stood before God, and to them were given 7 trumpets. They also pour out the 7 vials of plagues. Revelation 15:5. Revelation 15:5. After that I looked, and behold, the temple of the tabernacle of the testimony in heaven was opened, and the 7 angels came out of the temple, having the 7 plagues, clothed in pure and white linen, having their breasts girded with golden girdles. So, golden girdles are like crowns. They're gold. So this composition of the girdle symbolized rank. So these are the top 7 angels. Then one of these 7 showed John about the judgment of the great whore in Revelation 17:1, and one of them showed John the bride in Revelation 21:9. So it makes sense that these 7 angels are major enough actors in the book of Revelation to have been mentioned in the introduction. Isn't that interesting? Now, what are the 7 trumpets for? Well, what are trumpets for first? We covered 3 different significances of trumpets in the Bible in earlier sessions. One was to sound or announce a meeting. Another was to ready the army for an attack in a war. And the third was to sound the alarm for impending danger. And by process of elimination, that's what I think that the use of these trumpets are for in the book of Revelation. So, very interesting. Revelation 8:6. We'll just cover a few of these. Revelation 8:6. And the 7 angels which had the 7 trumpets prepared themselves to sound. The first angel sounded, and there followed hail and fire mingled with blood, and they were cast upon the earth. And the third part of trees was burnt up, and all green grass was burnt up. Well, something's going to fall from the sky like hail on fire. Well, a thick meteor shower could do that, and it would devastate whatever it fell upon, whatever continent it fell upon. Now, I don't know what the blood will be, but obviously it'll be something red. 1/3 of the trees will be burnt. Now, we've seen this kind of thing on a smaller scale with the forest fires in western USA, or when that object fell in 1914, I think it was, in Russia. It was a chunk of a comet that hit, and it just knocked all the trees down. Revelation 8:8, and a second angel sounded, and as it were a great mountain burning with fire was cast into the sea. And the third part of the sea became blood, and the third part of the creatures which were in the sea and had life died, and a third part of the ships were destroyed. Well, a great mountain burning with fire hitting the sea sounds a lot like an asteroid colliding with the earth and hitting an ocean, causing tsunamis, sinking ships and killing sea life. Revelation 8:10. And the third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp, and it fell upon the third part of the rivers, and upon the fountains of waters. And the name of the star is called Wormwood. And the third part of the waters became wormwood, and many men died of the waters, because they were made bitter. Well, a burning star falling upon land could be a comet made of poisonous chemicals, which broke up over continents and contaminated large portions of the fresh water. When the Shoemaker-Levy comet hit Jupiter about a decade ago, it first broke up in orbit and then impacted the planet in many places. So if this comet hits from the right angle, it could do the same thing, and its impact be spread over continents and poison the water. The book Revelation is giving us the account from the heavenly perspective. It's showing the spiritual causes, while Matthew and Daniel are written from the earth's perspective and only showing the effects. But the events both are astronomical in nature. Then Revelation 8:12, the fourth angel sounded, and a third part of the sun was smitten, and a third part of the moon, and the third part of the stars, so as the third part of them was darkened, and the day shone not for a third part of it, and the night likewise. Well, a galactic dust cloud could obscure 1/3 of the stars, or come between the earth and the sun. So these things are within the realm of physical possibility. You see, we exist in the universe, and it is like a shooting gallery. As we rotate around the Milky Way galaxy, the Earth could enter a portion of space full of debris, and all these things start falling from the sky. The Earth is orbiting around the sun at 67,000 miles per hour. The solar system is rotating in the Milky Way galaxy at approximately 500,000 miles per hour. And our entire galaxy is moving through the universe at 1.3 million miles per hour. That's how fast we're moving, and we don't even know it. Add to that whatever the relative velocity of the objects that collide with us. Wow. Oh, by the way, guess what direction our galaxy is moving in? I found it in an astrophysicist article about our galaxy's movement through space, and the guy who mentioned it probably does not have a clue to its significance. We are hurtling toward the portion of sky occupied by Leo and Virgo. That is the nexus of the zodiac and of the story of redemption told in the stars. Just below the junction of Virgo and Leo is the constellation of the cup of God's wrath being poured out on Hydra, the serpent, and also Corvus, the constellation of Corvus, the birds of prey devouring the serpent. Oh, well, gee whiz, God, could you make it any more plain? That is the theme of all time and the book of Revelation, and the coming Redeemer, and the destruction of the serpent, and we are traveling straight at it. It is the astronomical depiction of our future. Wow. Of all the directions that the cosmic compass could point in three-dimensional space, 360 degrees of XY and 360 degrees of Z, the odds are about 130,000 to 1 for any given direction. And what direction are we going in? It's not random. It's spiritually significant, because that's the beginning point and the ending point of the story of redemption told in stars, the nexus of Leo and Virgo. Bullinger says that it's represented by the great Sphinx in Egypt, with the head of a woman and the body of a lion. Well, that's woo-hoo to the seventh power, folks. The dust of all the universe was formerly purple smoke. Folks, I was so humbled and thankful and amazed when I realized that I couldn't write anything else or even think of anything else for a while after I realized that and explained it to my wife. That's just amazing times amazing. Well, we also are on another crash course to destiny, which will occur along the way. The meteors and asteroids and comets that may very well play a part in the book of Revelation are coursing through the universe even now toward that point too. They are racing toward us at amazing speed. I'm glad I'm going to be in heaven then, aren't you? And if you're unsure, just do the original Christian broadcast system test. Hallelujah, sock it to you. Just like I had to pause after this realization, I will give you the same courtesy, and we shall resume Revelation chapter 8 next week. Bless you.